The iron wagon rattled to a stop outside the Golden Rose Saloon, and Willa Bennett knew with absolute certainty that her life was about to end before it had truly begun. She pressed her face against the barred window, watching women in garish dresses parade past drunk miners and cattle drivers, their laughter forced and their eyes empty. Her uncle sat beside her in the cramped space, counting the money he would receive for delivering her to the madam who owned this establishment. It was 1876, and Hays City, Kansas was a place where desperate men came to forget their troubles, and where desperate girls like herself were commodities to be bought and sold. "Get out," her Uncle Vernon said, his tobacco-stained teeth showing through a cruel smile. "Madame Laurent is waiting, and she does not like to be kept waiting. You will work off your father's debts, girl, every last cent of them." Willa's father had died 6 months ago, crushed beneath a falling beam in the rail yard where he had worked. Her mother had passed when Willa was only 7 years old, leaving her father to raise her alone. He had been a good man, a loving father, but he had also been a gambling man. When Vernon had shown up at their small house with papers claiming her father owed him $3,000, Willa had no way to dispute it. She had no money, no family except this vicious uncle, and no prospects. Vernon had given her a choice: work at the Golden Rose until the debt was paid, or he would see her hanged for theft, claiming she had stolen from her father's employer. Neither option was really a choice at all. The door to the wagon swung open, and Vernon grabbed her arm roughly, hauling her onto the dusty street. The June sun beat down mercilessly, and Willa stumbled in her worn shoes. She had tried to keep herself presentable, but her dress was faded and patched, her blonde hair tied back in a simple braid. At 19 years old, she had imagined a different life for herself, perhaps teaching school or working in a shop. She had never imagined this. Madame Laurent stood in the doorway of the Golden Rose, a tall woman with dark hair piled high on her head and a crimson dress that seemed to swallow the light. Her face was painted white, her lips blood red, and her eyes assessed Willa with the cold efficiency of a horse trader examining livestock. "She is young," Madame Laurent said, her French accent thick. "Untouched, pure as Sunday morning," Vernon lied smoothly. It was true, but hearing him say it like it was just another selling point made Willa's stomach turn. "Then we have a deal. 500 now, the rest when she begins work tonight." Willa's vision swam. Tonight. She had hours, not days, not even a single day to find another way. Her hands trembled as she looked around desperately, searching for something, anything, some miraculous escape that she knew would not come. That was when she saw him. He stood across the street, leaning against a hitching post with the easy confidence of a man who had nothing to prove. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that brushed his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore a dusty brown hat, a blue shirt rolled to his elbows, and a gun belt slung low on his hips. But it was his face that caught her attention, strong-jawed and weathered by sun and wind, with a scar running through his left eyebrow that somehow made him more handsome rather than less. He was watching the exchange with an expression Willa could not quite read. His gray eyes narrowed. Vernon took the money from Madame Laurent and shoved Willa forward. "Pleasure doing business with you." "Wait." The word came out as a whisper, but then Willa found her voice and said it louder. "Wait. Please, there has to be another way. I can work, I can do anything. Please do not make me do this." Madame Laurent's expression did not change. "You owe a debt, girl. You will work it off on your back, and you will be grateful I am giving you a roof over your head and food in your belly. Now come inside." "No." Willa wrenched herself free and stumbled backward. She collided with something solid and warm, and strong hands caught her shoulders, steadying her. "Easy there." a deep voice said, and Willa turned to find herself face to face with the gray-eyed stranger. Up close, he was even more striking, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he was not smiling now. "Let her go, Cowboy," Vernon snarled. "This is none of your concern." The stranger looked down at Willa, his gaze searching her face. "Is this what you want?" he asked quietly. "No," Willa said, her voice breaking. "God, no, but I have no choice. My father owed money and I have nothing to pay it with." "How much?" the stranger asked, his attention still on her. $3,000, Vernon said with a nasty laugh. "You got that kind of money, drifter?" The stranger finally looked at Vernon, and something in his expression made the older man take a step back. "As a matter of fact, I do." He released Willa's shoulders and reached into his coat, pulling out a leather wallet. From it, he counted out bills with the easy movements of a man who had done such things before. $3,000, cash. I am buying her debt." Willa's heart stopped. The entire street seemed to go silent, everyone staring at this madman who was casually offering a fortune for a girl he did not even know. Madame Laurent's eyes glittered with interest. "The debt was sold to me, Cowboy. If you want the girl, you pay me." The stranger did not even blink. He counted out another $500 and held it out to Madame Laurent. "For your trouble. Now the debt is mine and the lady is free to go." "Who the hell are you?" Vernon demanded. "Name is Barrett Ford," the stranger said, tipping his hat. "And you are leaving now, before I decide that a man who sells his own kin deserves worse than just losing his payday." Something in Barrett's voice, a quiet steel beneath the polite words, made Vernon back away. He snatched the money from Madame Laurent and practically ran to his wagon, climbing aboard and whipping the horses into motion. The wagon clattered away down the street, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake. Madame Laurent tucked the money into her bodice and gave Barrett a long look. "You are a fool, Monsieur Ford. That is a lot of money for a girl you do not know." "Maybe," Barrett agreed. "But it is my money to spend as I please." The madam shrugged and turned back into the Golden Rose, the door swinging shut behind her. The crowd that had gathered began to disperse, disappointed that there had been no violence. Willa stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Barrett turned to her, his expression gentle. "You all right, miss?" "I don't understand," Willa said, her voice shaking. "Why did you do that?" "You just gave away $3,500 for a stranger." "Because you needed help, and I could give it," Barrett said simply. "No woman should be forced into that life. No one should be forced into anything." Tears spilled down Willa's cheeks before she could stop them. She had been holding herself together through sheer will, refusing to cry in front of Vernon or Madame Laurent, but this unexpected kindness shattered her composure. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much. I will pay you back, I swear it. Every penny. I will work, I will do anything." "Hey now," Barrett said, pulling a handkerchief from his pocket and offering it to her. "No need for that. I did not buy your debt to own you. You are free. You do not owe me anything." Willa took the handkerchief and pressed it to her face, breathing in the scent of leather and sage. "But I do owe you. I owe you everything. You saved my life." Barrett shifted uncomfortably, clearly unused to such gratitude. "What is your name?" "Willa Bennett." "Well, Miss Bennett, do you have somewhere to go? Family, friends?" Willa shook her head. "No, my father is dead, my mother too." "Vernon was my only family, and you saw what he is." Barrett frowned, thinking. "You said you would work. Can you cook, clean, handle horses?" "I can cook and clean," Willa said quickly. "I am not much with horses, but I am willing to learn. I can do anything you need." "I have a ranch about 10 miles outside of town," Barrett said. "It is not much, just me and my foreman and a couple of hands, but I could use someone to keep the house, cook the meals, that sort of thing." The pay would be $30 a month plus room and board. Would that suit you?" Willa stared at him, unable to believe her luck. "You are offering me a job, a real job, if you want it." "Yes," Willa said immediately. "Yes, thank you, I want it." Barrett smiled for the first time, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and somehow lighter. "Then let us get you out of this town. Do you have any belongings?" "Just a small bag in the wagon, but Vernon took it with him." "We will get you new things," Barrett said. "Come on." He led her to a sturdy bay horse tied at the hitching post, a beautiful animal with intelligent eyes. Barrett swung into the saddle with easy grace, then held out his hand to Willa. "You ever ridden?" "Not often," Willa admitted. "It is all right. Just hold on to me." Willa took his hand and let him pull her up behind him. She settled onto the horse's back, her arms wrapping around Barrett's waist out of necessity. She could feel the solid warmth of him, the strength in his body, and it made her feel safer than she had felt in months. They rode out of Hayes City at an easy pace, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the prairie. Willa had lived in Kansas all her life, but she had rarely left town, and the vast openness of the land both frightened and thrilled her. The grass rippled like water in the wind, and the sky stretched endlessly overhead, so blue it hurt to look at it. "How long have you had your ranch?" Willa asked, partly out of curiosity and partly to break the comfortable silence. 3 years now," Barrett said. "I was a cowboy for a long time, drove cattle up from Texas to the railheads. Saved my money, bought some land, started building something that was mine. It is hard work, but it is good work." "You must be very successful to have saved so much money." Barrett was quiet for a moment. "I also sold some land I inherited from my father. He died 2 years ago, left me a piece of property in Colorado. I did not want it, did not want anything to do with that place, so I sold it. That is where the money came from." There was something painful in his voice, an old hurt that Willa recognized because she carried her own. "I am sorry about your father." "We were not close," Barrett said shortly, in a tone that made it clear he did not want to discuss it further. They rode in silence for a while longer, the rhythmic motion of the horse soothing. Willa found herself relaxing against Barrett's back, her exhaustion catching up with her. She had barely slept the night before, too terrified of what the morning would bring. "You can rest if you need to," Barrett said, his voice gentle. "I will make sure you do not fall." "I am all right," Willa said, but even as she spoke, her eyes were drifting closed. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, Barrett was saying her name softly. "Miss Bennett, Willa." "We are here." Willa blinked awake and looked around. They had arrived at a small ranch nestled in a valley between 2 low hills. There was a house, bigger than Willa had expected, built of sturdy wood with a wide porch. Nearby stood a barn, a corral with several horses, and a bunkhouse. Everything looked well maintained and cared for, the mark of a man who took pride in his work. Barrett dismounted and helped Willa down, his hands firm and steady on her waist. "Welcome to the Broken Arrow Ranch." "It is beautiful," Willa said honestly. A man emerged from the barn, older than Barrett by perhaps 15 years, with graying hair and a weathered face. "Barrett, you are back earlier than I expected. Who is this?" "Josiah, this is Willa Bennett," Barrett said. "She is going to be our new housekeeper." "Willa, this is Josiah Pierce, my foreman and the man who keeps this place running when I am off being foolish." Josiah's eyes were sharp and assessing, but not unkind. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Bennett. We surely could use some help around here. These men are hopeless at keeping house." "I am happy to help," Willa said, "and please call me Willa." "Then you call me Josiah," the older man said with a warm smile. "Come on, I will show you to your room. Barrett, you want to take care of your horse." Already on it, Barrett said, leading the bay toward the barn. Josiah took Willa into the house, which was indeed in need of a woman's touch. The main room was spacious, with a large fireplace and comfortable but dusty furniture. The kitchen was well equipped but cluttered, and there were dishes stacked in the basin. Josiah led her up a narrow staircase to the second floor, where there were 4 bedrooms. "This one is yours," Josiah said, opening a door at the end of the hall. "It is small, but it has a good bed and a window with a nice view." The room was indeed small, with just a bed, a dresser, and a washstand, but it was clean and bright, with a window that looked out over the prairie. To Willa, who had been facing a tiny room in a brothel, it looked like paradise. "It is perfect," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Josiah." "No need to thank me," Josiah said. "Barrett is a good man, one of the best I have ever known. If he brought you here, then you are welcome. Now I expect you are hungry. Why don't you come down in a bit and we will see about getting some supper together?" Willa nodded, and Josiah left her alone. She sat on the bed, running her hands over the soft quilt, and let herself cry again, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. Her life had been saved today, not just from the golden rose but from a future with no hope. She had been given a second chance, and she was determined not to waste it. After washing her face in the basin, Willa went downstairs to find Barrett in the kitchen, attempting to slice bread with minimal success. He looked up when she entered and gave her a sheepish grin. "I am better with a rope than a knife," he admitted. "Let me," Willa said, taking the knife from him. Their fingers brushed, and she felt a spark of something she could not quite name. She focused on the bread, slicing it evenly. "Where is Josiah?" checking on the horses. "We have a mare about to foal, and he wants to keep an eye on her." Willa looked around the kitchen, assessing what was available. There were eggs, bacon, potatoes, and some canned vegetables. Not much, but she could work with it. "When did you last have a proper meal?" Barrett thought about it. "Define proper." Willa laughed, a sound that surprised her. She had not laughed in so long. "That is what I thought. Sit down, I am going to cook you dinner." "You do not have to start working tonight," Barrett protested. "You have been through a lot today." "I want to," Willa said. "Besides, cooking will help me settle my nerves. I always cook when I am upset or worried." Barrett sat at the table and watched her work, his gray eyes following her movements. Willa felt self-conscious under his gaze, but also strangely pleased. She fried bacon until it was crispy, scrambled eggs with butter and a pinch of salt, and fried potatoes until they were golden brown. It was simple food, but it smelled wonderful, and when she set a plate in front of Barrett, his face lit up. "This looks amazing," he said. "It is just eggs and bacon," Willa said, but she was smiling. Josiah came in just as she was finishing, and she fixed a plate for him too. The 3 of them sat around the table, eating and talking. Josiah told stories about the ranch, about the cattle they raised and the horses they trained. Barrett added details here and there, and Willa listened, fascinated. It was so different from the life she had known in town, so much more connected to the land and the animals. After dinner, Willa insisted on cleaning up, and the men did not argue. She washed the dishes and put everything away, already starting to memorize where things belonged. When she finished, she found Barrett on the porch, staring out at the darkening prairie. "It is peaceful here," Willa said, stepping outside to join him. "That is why I love it," Barrett said. "When I was younger, I wanted adventure, excitement. I wanted to see everything and do everything. But the older I get, the more I value peace." "How old are you?" Willa asked, then blushed. "I am sorry, that is rude." "It is all right," Barrett said with a laugh. "I am 27, and you?" 19. "So young," Barrett said softly. "You have your whole life ahead of you, Willa. I am glad I could help you have a chance at a good one." "Why did you really help me?" Willa asked. No one just gives away that much money for a stranger." Barrett was silent for a long time, his jaw working as if he was struggling with what to say. Finally, he spoke. "My mother was sold to a brothel when she was 16. My father bought her out, married her, but the damage was done. She never recovered from what had been done to her. She died when I was 10, and I always wondered if things would have been different if someone had saved her before she had been hurt. So when I saw you today, saw the fear in your eyes, I knew I had to do something. I could not save my mother, but I could save you." Willa's heart ached for him, for the little boy who had watched his mother suffer. Without thinking, she reached out and took his hand. "I am so sorry, Barrett, but thank you for trusting me with that, and thank you for saving me. I will never forget what you did today." Barrett looked down at their joined hands, and Willa saw something shift in his expression, something warm and tentative. "You are welcome, Willa, and I hope you will be happy here." "I already am," Willa said, and she meant it. Over the following weeks, Willa settled into life at the Broken Arrow Ranch. She woke early each morning to make breakfast for the men, packed lunches for them to take out to the range, and spent her days cleaning, mending, and preparing dinner. It was hard work, but it was honest work, and she took pride in it. The house began to shine under her care, curtains were washed, floors were scrubbed, and the kitchen was organized with an efficiency that made Josiah shake his head in wonder. But it was not just the house that was changing. Willa herself was changing too. The fear that had haunted her began to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence. She laughed more, smiled more, and began to feel like herself again. And through it all, she found herself increasingly aware of Barrett. He was a constant presence, even when he was out working. She would catch herself looking for him at mealtimes, listening for his voice, noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. He was kind and patient, never demanding, never harsh. He treated her with a respect she had never experienced from a man before, asking her opinion, listening when she spoke, valuing her thoughts. And she was not the only one changing. Barrett, too, seemed different. He smiled more, lingered longer over meals, found excuses to be in the house when he should have been working. Josiah noticed, of course, and teased Barrett mercilessly, but the younger man just laughed it off. One evening, about a month after Willa's arrival, Barrett came in from the range looking troubled. Willa was in the kitchen, kneading bread dough, and she looked up when she heard him enter. "What is wrong?" she asked immediately. Barrett sank into a chair and ran a hand through his hair. "We have been losing cattle. Not many, just 1 or 2 at a time, but it is adding up. Either we have rustlers or something is killing them." "Rustlers?" Willa asked, alarmed. "Is that dangerous?" "It can be," Barrett admitted, "but we do not know for sure that is what it is. Josiah and I are going to ride out tomorrow, check the far pastures, see if we can find any sign of what is going on." "Be careful," Willa said, her hands stilling on the dough. Barrett looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that made Willa's breath catch. "I will, I promise." The next day, Barrett and Josiah left before dawn, riding out to the far reaches of the ranch. Willa spent the day in an agony of worry, jumping at every sound, watching the horizon for their return. The other ranch hands, 2 young men named Tom and Billy, noticed her distress and tried to reassure her, but it did not help much. It was nearly dark when Barrett and Josiah finally returned, and Willa ran out to meet them, her heart pounding. "What did you find?" "Rustlers," Josiah said grimly. "Found tracks, signs of a camp. They have been working our land for weeks." "Did you see them?" Willa asked. "No, but we will," Barrett said. "We are going to set a watch, catch them in the act." "That sounds dangerous," Willa said, her voice rising. "What if they have guns? What if you get hurt?" "Willa," Barrett said gently, dismounting and coming to stand in front of her. "This is part of ranching. We have to protect what is ours, but I will be careful, I promise." "You promised that this morning and you were gone all day," Willa said, and she heard the tremor in her own voice. "I was so worried." Barrett's expression softened and he reached out to cup her cheek with one rough hand. "I am sorry I worried you, but I am back and I am fine. See?" Willa leaned into his touch without meaning to, and she saw Barrett's eyes darken. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, and she realized with a start that she wanted him to. But then Josiah cleared his throat pointedly, and the moment was broken. "I will go take care of the horses," Josiah said, leading both animals toward the barn with a knowing smile on his face. Barrett dropped his hand, looking almost embarrassed. "I should go help him." "Dinner will be ready in an hour," Willa said, her cheeks burning. That night, the tension between them was palpable. They sat across from each other at the table, their eyes meeting and then skittering away, the air thick with unspoken words. Josiah watched them with barely concealed amusement, and even Tom and Billy seemed to sense that something was different. After dinner, Willa went to her room early, claiming exhaustion. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart racing. She was falling in love with Barrett Ford. It was a terrifying realization because she had no idea if he felt the same way. He was kind to her, yes, but he was kind to everyone. The way he had touched her face tonight could have meant anything or nothing. A soft knock on her door startled her out of her thoughts. "Willa, are you awake?" It was Barrett's voice. Willa sat up, her heart hammering. "Yes, come in." The door opened and Barrett stepped inside, closing it behind him. He looked nervous, uncertain, so different from his usual confident self. "I am sorry to bother you, but I needed to talk to you." "It is all right," Willa said. "What is it?" Barrett came to sit on the edge of her bed, his hands clasped between his knees. "I have been thinking about what you said earlier about being worried, and I realized something. I like that you worry about me. I like that you care. I like you, Willa, a lot. More than I should, probably, considering you work for me and you have only been here a month. But I cannot help it. You are smart and strong and beautiful, and being around you makes me happier than I have been in years." Willa's breath caught in her throat. "Barrett." "I know I have no right to feel this way," Barrett continued, the words tumbling out now like he could not stop them. "You came here looking for safety, for a fresh start, and here I am, your employer, telling you I have feelings for you. It is not fair to you, but I had to be honest." "I had to tell you." "Barrett," Willa said again, more firmly this time. "Stop talking." He looked at her, his gray eyes wide and vulnerable. "I like you too," Willa said softly. "I think I have liked you since the moment you saved me. You are the kindest, most honorable man I have ever met, and yes, you make me happy too, so happy that it scares me sometimes." Barrett's face broke into the most beautiful smile Willa had ever seen. "Really, really," Willa confirmed, smiling back. "Can I kiss you?" Barrett asked, his voice rough. "Yes," Willa whispered. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, but Willa did not want to change her mind. She wanted this, wanted him. When his lips met hers, it was soft and sweet and perfect. Willa's eyes fluttered closed, and she reached up to rest her hand on his chest, feeling his heart pounding beneath her palm. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, and Willa felt like she was burning up from the inside out. But then Barrett pulled back, breathing hard. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "I do not want to, but I should. I do not want to rush you, and I do not want you to think that this is why I brought you here." "I know why you brought me here," Willa said, touching his face. "And I trust you, Barrett, completely." "I am glad," Barrett said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "But I am still going to court you properly. You deserve that. You deserve everything." He stood and walked to the door, pausing to look back at her. "Good night, Willa." "Good night, Barrett." After he left, Willa lay back on her bed, her fingers touching her lips, still tingling from his kiss. She felt like she was floating, like everything in her life had suddenly aligned in a way she had never dared to hope for. The next few weeks were the happiest of Willa's life. Barrett courted her with an old-fashioned sweetness that made her heart swell. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie, taught her to ride on a gentle mare named Daisy, and sat with her on the porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. They stole kisses when they thought no one was looking, though Josiah always seemed to know and would grin at them knowingly. The rustling problem continued, however. Barrett and Josiah took turns watching the herds at night, and twice they had seen signs of intruders but had not caught them. It was frustrating and worrying, and Willa could see the strain it put on Barrett. Then one night, everything came to a head. Willa was awakened by the sound of gunshots in the distance. She bolted out of bed and ran downstairs, her heart in her throat. Josiah was already there, pulling on his boots. "What is happening?" Willa demanded. "Rustlers," Josiah said grimly. "Barrett is out there. I am going to help him." "I am coming with you," Willa said. "No, you are not," Josiah said firmly. "You stay here where it is safe." But Willa could not stay. She watched Josiah ride off into the darkness, and then she saddled Daisy with shaking hands and followed. She did not know what she could do, but she could not sit in the house while Barrett was in danger. She found them near the far pasture. Barrett was on foot, his horse standing nearby, facing down 3 men on horseback. Even in the moonlight, Willa could see that he had his gun drawn. Josiah was approaching from the other side, and the rustlers were caught between them. "It is over," Barrett was saying, his voice calm but firm. "Put down your guns and ride out, and we will forget this happened." "Like hell," one of the rustlers snarled, and he raised his gun. Everything seemed to happen at once. Josiah shouted a warning, Barrett dove to the side, and a shot rang out. But the rustler's horse spooked at the sound, and the bullet went wide. Josiah fired, hitting the man in the shoulder, and he fell from his horse with a cry of pain. The other 2 rustlers exchanged a look, and then spurred their horses into a gallop, disappearing into the darkness. Barrett got to his feet, his gun still trained on the wounded rustler who was groaning on the ground. Josiah dismounted and went to secure him, and that was when Barrett saw Willa. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, striding toward her. "I told you to stay at the house." "No, Josiah told me to stay," Willa said, dismounting, "and I could not. I had to make sure you were all right." Barrett's anger melted away, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I am all right, but you scared me half to death. What if you had been hurt?" "What if you had been hurt?" Willa countered, her voice muffled against his chest. "She has a point," Josiah called out. "And can you 2 have your lovers quarrel later? I need help getting this fool back to the house so we can send for the sheriff." Between the 3 of them, they got the wounded rustler onto a horse and back to the ranch. They locked him in the barn, and Barrett rode to town to fetch Sheriff Anderson. The sheriff arrived near dawn, took the rustler into custody, and thanked Barrett and Josiah for their work. "We will find the other 2, Sheriff Anderson promised. "They cannot have gotten far, and now we know what they look like." After the sheriff left, Barrett and Willa finally had a moment alone. They stood on the porch, watching the sun rise over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "That was terrifying," Willa said softly. "I know. I am sorry you had to see it." "I am not," Willa said, turning to face him, "because it made me realize something. Life is short and uncertain, and we do not always get second chances. Barrett, I love you. I think I have loved you since the day you saved me, but I know it for certain now. I love you, and I do not want to waste any more time pretending I do not." Barrett's eyes were bright with emotion. "I love you too, Willa. I have loved you for weeks now. I was just waiting for the right time to tell you, but you are right. There is no sense in waiting." He took her hands in his expression suddenly serious. Willa Bennett, will you marry me? I know it is fast. I know we have not known each other long, but I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I want to spend the rest of my days with you. I want to build a life with you, a family. Will you have me? Willa's heart felt like it might burst. Yes, she said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, Barrett, I will marry you. He kissed her then, long and deep, and Willa felt like she was finally, truly home. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony in Hayes City. Josiah stood as Barrett's best man, and the wife of the general store owner, a kind woman named Mrs. Henderson, stood with Willa. It was a small gathering, just a handful of people, but it was perfect. Willa wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her make, and Barrett wore his best suit, looking so handsome that Willa could barely breathe. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Barrett kissed her with such tenderness that Willa knew she had made the right choice. This man, this good, honorable man, was her husband now. He was her future, her partner, her love. They returned to the ranch for a celebration. Josiah had organized a feast with the help of Tom and Billy, and there was music and dancing and laughter. Willa danced with her new husband under the stars, feeling like she was living in a dream. That night, in the bedroom they now shared, Barrett made love to her with a patience and gentleness that brought tears to her eyes. He whispered words of love and devotion, and Willa knew that she was truly, deeply loved. She had been saved from a terrible fate, and in the process, she had found something she had never dared to hope for, a love that would last a lifetime. As the months passed, Willa and Barrett's love only deepened. They worked side by side, building their ranch and their life together. Willa proved to be a natural with the ranch business, helping with the books and making suggestions that often turned out to be brilliant. Barrett, in turn, supported her in everything she wanted to do, encouraging her to learn and grow. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. The rustling problem was resolved when the sheriff caught the other 2 men trying to sell stolen cattle in a town 50 miles away. With that threat gone, Barrett was able to expand the herd and even buy more land. He hired 2 more hands, good men who respected Willa and treated her with the deference due the lady of the house. A year after their marriage, Willa discovered she was pregnant. She was nervous to tell Barrett, afraid he might worry or be anxious, but his reaction was pure joy. He swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing like a boy. "We are going to have a baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "A family, our family. Are you happy?" Willa asked, even though she could see that he was. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Barrett said, kissing her soundly. "You have given me everything, Willa. A home, a purpose, a reason to wake up smiling every morning, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy was not easy. Willa suffered from terrible sickness in the early months, and Barrett hovered over her like a worried mother hen, much to Josiah's amusement. But Willa did not mind. She loved his attentiveness, loved knowing that he cared so much. In the spring of 1878, Willa gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him James Vernon Ford, after Barrett's father, whose middle name was James, and Willa insisted on Vernon as the middle name not after her uncle, but because it meant strength, and she wanted her son to be strong. Barrett was besotted with his son from the first moment. He held the tiny baby with such care, his strong hands cradling the fragile little body, and Willa fell in love with him all over again watching him become a father. Life settled into a new rhythm. Willa balanced caring for James with running the household, and Barrett continued to manage the ranch with Josiah's help. They had their challenges, as all families do. There were hard winters and dry summers, sick animals and broken equipment, but they faced it all together, And that made all the difference when James was 2 years old. Willa became pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to twin girls, Clara and Rose, who had their mother's blonde hair and their father's gray eyes. Barrett was overwhelmed with emotion when the midwife placed both babies in his arms, tears streaming down his face. 3 children, he said in wonder. We have 3 beautiful children, Willa. We do, Willa agreed, exhausted but happy. And they are lucky to have you as their father. The years passed in a blur of happy chaos. James grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the ranch and spent every moment he could with his father, learning about horses and cattle. Clara was wild and adventurous, always getting into mischief, while Rose was quiet and artistic, preferring to sit with her mother and draw pictures. Josiah became like a grandfather to the children, teaching them to ride and telling them stories about the old days. Tom and Billy, who had stayed on at the ranch, married women from town and built their own small houses on the property, expanding the ranch into a true community. One evening when James was 10 and the twins were 8, Willa and Barrett sat on the porch, watching their children play in the yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and everything was peaceful. "You ever think about that day in Hays City?" Barrett asked quietly. "The day we met, all the time," Willa admitted. "I think about how different my life could have been if you had not been there, if you had not saved me." "I think about it too," Barrett said, "but I do not think of it as me saving you anymore. I think we saved each other. Before I met you, I was just existing, going through the motions. But you gave me a reason to truly live. You gave me love and family and purpose. So really, you saved me just as much as I saved you." Willa leaned against her husband, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "We saved each other then," she said softly, "and we have been saving each other every day since." "That is what love is, I think," Barrett said, "choosing to save each other over and over again." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching their children and the sunset, and Willa thought about how far she had come. She had been a frightened girl being sold to a brothel, with no hope and no future. Now she was a wife, a mother, a partner in a thriving ranch. She had a family who loved her, a home that was truly hers, and a man who would move heaven and earth for her. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Clara ran up to the porch. "Mama, Papa, come play with us." "We will be right there," Barrett said, standing and pulling Willa to her feet. They joined their children in the yard, playing until the light faded completely and they had to go inside. Later, after the children were tucked into bed and the house was quiet, Willa and Barrett lay together in their bed, wrapped in each other's arms. "I love you," Barrett whispered in the darkness. "I love you too," Willa whispered back. "Always and forever." And as she drifted off to sleep, safe and warm and loved, Willa knew that she had found her happily ever after. It had not been the life she had imagined for herself, but it was so much better than anything she could have dreamed. She had been saved by a cowboy with a kind heart, and in return, she had given him everything she had. Together, they had built something beautiful, something lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone. The years continued to be kind to the Ford family. James grew into a fine young man, eventually taking over much of the day-to-day running of the ranch as Barrett grew older. He married a schoolteacher from town, a smart woman named Emma, who reminded Willa very much of herself at that age. Clara, true to her wild nature, married a cavalry officer and moved to a fort in Montana, though she visited often with her husband and their children. Rose stayed close to home, marrying a local rancher and settling on land adjacent to the Broken Arrow, so Willa got to see her daughter and grandchildren nearly every day. Barrett and Willa aged gracefully together. their love never diminishing. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, tempered by the trials they had weathered and sweetened by the joys they had shared. They took to spending their evenings on the porch as they had when they were young, watching the sunset and talking about their life, their children, their grandchildren. On their 30th wedding anniversary, surrounded by 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and more friends than they could count, Barrett stood and raised a glass. "To my wife," he said, his voice still strong despite the gray in his hair and the lines on his face, "who walked into my life when I needed her most and has been my greatest blessing every day since. I love you, Willa Ford." "To love," Willa said, raising her own glass, her eyes bright with happy tears, "and to second chances." They drank, and everyone cheered, and Willa looked around at the faces of the people she loved, the family she and Barrett had created together, and knew that her life was complete. She had been given a gift that day in Hayes City, a gift of hope and possibility, and she had spent every day since making the most of it. As the party continued around them, Barrett pulled Willa close and kissed her temple. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "Not a single one," Willa said, meaning it with all her heart. "You gave me a new life, Barrett, and it has been more wonderful than I ever could have imagined." "We gave each other a new life," Barrett corrected gently, "and I would do it all again in a heartbeat." They stayed like that, holding each other close, surrounded by love and laughter and the life they had built together from nothing but hope and determination, and a love that had proven itself unbreakable time and time again. And when they finally passed, many years later, first Barrett, and then Willa just a few months after, they were laid to rest side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple stone that read, "Barrett and Willa Ford together forever." Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren continued their legacy, running the Broken Arrow Ranch with the same love and dedication that had built it. And the story of how it all began, of a cowboy who saved a girl and found his own salvation in the process, was passed down through the generations as a testament to the power of love, courage, and compassion.